So Lance, welcome back.
Thanks, Andrew. It's a pleasure. It's been quite a while. I think it's just almost 18 months since the battle I had with Chris that you sort of adjudicated on, and of course, the first podcast, which was a few weeks before that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was that was a fair battle. It was very popular. I think definitely those on YouTube and LinkedIn and really responded to it, and it prompted a lot of debate. So I just encourage our audience who haven't come across that one to check it out. It's the Excel is dead, but I'm sure a lot has happened since then. So what's changed in the meantime?
Well, I can confirm that Excel's officially not dead. I guess, the more and more people I speak to, I've presented at a couple of business expos in Australia, the Accounting Business Expo, the Account Tech Live, which is very much more so in the small to medium-sized enterprises. We've picked up a couple of new technologies and looked at playing with them, using them, things that just make things easier. And I guess one of the key things that we've realized is, whilst financial modeling is really valuable for decision making, if you don't have the right data and if you don't get the right capacity in the team to build the models and make the decisions, then really it's not going to go anywhere. So we've actually looked at, because financial modeling is about decision making, right? Forget the word financial modeling. It's about better decision making. And so it's one type of decision making, but you cannot make good decisions on bad data. And so what we've realized is that, how do we look at the full value chain of decision making? We started with financial modeling in Model Citizen, but we've broadened out to automation and analytics. And we're not going to be an analytics house. We're going to work with other people and partner up. And I'm not going to become a Power BI expert, but I absolutely love Power BI, and sort of using it and using other plugins and other technologies around it. So yeah, we've sort of broadened ourselves, but still focused at our purpose, which is helping finance professionals and business owners make relevant, informed, and purposeful decisions with insight. I mean, that's the key. And if you're doing that, then you're adding value. And, it doesn't matter if you're an FP&A person or you're a finance business partner or a CFO or a virtual CFO or a financial mentor or whatever it is. If you understand the skill of decision making, that's where the value is.
Yeah, and I like the way you sort of honed in on the value chain of it. Would you mind maybe giving some sort of steps for folks to follow? Because I know a lot of companies and finance teams have invested in these ERPs and goodness knows what bits of technology to try and help make better decision making. But essentially, what do you see as the value chain?
Well, so if you think about the value chain of anything, of a product, I think if you look at, normal businesses that sell a particular product, now they might get suppliers that give them their raw materials, and then they sell to a distributor. Mm-hmm. So going up the value chain is not just going downstream, but it's also upstream. So you say, well, actually, I don't want to just have cows and sell milk. And get my feed. I actually want to farm the feed, have so I'm actually getting feed for the cows through the grains that I'm planting, and I'm going to sell my milk online, right? So that's what you talk about, building the value chain in any business. When it comes to finance, our value chain is not just about really the decision making and the product that we're selling, or which is effectively the dashboard or the forecast or whatever it is. Not just the output, it's the full end-to-end of that process. So at the first part of the process is your transactional record keeping, control, workflow. And I think that's where ERPs and other accounting systems, particularly your cloud accounting like Xero and QuickBooks, are really, really good. And they've got some fantastic technologies, optical character recognition or OCR, where you take photos of stuff and it does the record keeping and matching, and Xero gamified the bank rec, all these sorts of really cool. A lot of there's also AI driven and automation at that side, I think, is really useful. But where I have a bit of an issue with ERP setting the full end to end, because the reality is they're just never going to be as good as all the other tools out there, which need to be customized. So no matter what you look at, it just doesn't fill the full value chain. So the full value chain is your transactional work, your analysis and your analytics, which is backward looking, but also there's analytics that is forward looking, and then also the financial modeling and strategic planning and forecasting. So you've really got the full end-to-end spectrum. So we've sort of landed on this concept of the 3-stack tech stack, right? It's your so you need to do whatever you do really quickly, really efficiently, and accurately. So automation is a key part of that technology stack, and automation sort of goes through the full value chain, right? It's not just about transaction. You can also automate some of the forecasting. Then you have your analytics, which is really understanding the data. And there's 4 types of analytics for those that don't know. There's the descriptive, which describes what happened. There's the diagnostic, which diagnoses what happened. So both of those are backward-looking analytics. Then you have your 2 forward-looking analytics, which is predictive and prescriptive. So predictive is predicting what's going to happen, and prescriptive is going to prescribe you an action given what the prediction says, right? So those, particularly the predictive and the prescriptive is very AI-driven, lots of data, so heavy machine, low human intervention, right? So it's more around the human looking and understanding that and seeing if there's anomalies, and maybe even trying to work out what the black box is doing, right? Because in most cases, it's lots of data in, there's algorithms and Python coding and a whole range of things that spit out some numbers that us humans are trying to work out, hang on, how did I get to that answer? And we don't, the answer is we don't know. There's so much triangulation and data points we often don't know. It is a bit of a black box. So that's a concern, right? So we're going to make a decision on a black box. So we need to get a better handle on that. And then the last part of that three stack is the financial modeling aspect, which is, I guess, less data, so less machine, more human. And it's a lot broader. So there's not as much data because you probably model to chart of, you're not modeling a transaction level. No one builds a model based on transaction level. That's what you would do, a predictive model on transaction level. But as a financial model, you'd probably do it more of at the chart of account level, but then you'd go back to drivers. So it's a driver-based, it's 3-way, which is your income statement, your balance sheet, and your cash flow. So it's much wider, but in the end, there's a lot of interaction. There's a lot of collaboration. You've got to talk to the business. You've got to understand how they make money. You can understand why did our forecast not meet, why do our actuals not meet the forecast? Why are we behind budget? What levers can we play? And this is where, modeling, and particularly financial modeling comes very powerful. So that's the full value chain, Andrew. Sorry, it's a bit of a ramble, but it's your automation back end, you're getting your house clean, getting the data right, analytics to understand back and forward, and then modeling to see what's going ahead. And then, influencing, right? So I think that's the technology stuff, right? But a lot of this is also about humans, right? And the fascinating thing for me is technology is forcing us to be more human, right? We are forced to become more human as a result of the technology because we're not stuck behind our spreadsheets and paper, because a lot of it's going to be done.
Yeah, I suppose just in there how you described that stack, Lance. There's for those maybe frightened of technology or robotic or coming into finance, there's still a lot of opportunities for finance people to apply their technical skills. If we maybe look less as finance but more informational type professionals, and it's still fundamentally about helping the organization make better decisions. That's why accounting was set up in the first place, to track things.
Well, I mean, spot on. I mean, we still need finance professionals to understand the data.
Yeah.
To actually, we have revenue recognition and the leasing standards. I can't quote the actual standard name, but they've changed, right? So we now have to change the way that. So I know that there was an organization that had a predictive revenue model, and they had to shelve it and start again because the revenue recognition standard came in, and then they had to change the way that it calculated or predicted revenue. So things are going to change, and that's where humans have to be involved and understanding changes in business conditions, right? Business is changing far quicker than it ever was. So you can't just sort of set it off and let it go. Humans still have to be involved. In fact, someone said to me, I can't know if I read it somewhere, but Elon Musk built an entire AI-driven manufacturing plant and actually unwound some of it, because what he found was that there were problems. So you needed to interject a human and AI, a human and a robot, not just the robot, because together they're actually going to be better than them individually. Yes, humans make mistakes, but we also understand human behavior and we can communicate. And a lot of business is about communication and understanding.
Yeah, I like the way you put that there, Lance, because I remember I went on a factory visit. I like walking around when I go and work with some clients, and I went to their floor, and they used to make houses out of timber, and what it was on one part they had the machine doing all the standard estate type houses, all the common sort of builds, computer program just fired the nails in around the wood, pulled it together. Then you had another line which was full of a lot more human beings than robots, doing the bespoke houses. And I got a sense in terms of the stack you're sort of describing, the automation does all the basic bits, the building blocks, so to say, the common parts. And then based on those common parts, you then might tweak it to make something very unique or useful out of it. And if you think about it, the way to get an edge in business nowadays is to develop those competitive advantages, those unique selling points, those slight bits of difference. And I think that's where I like what you've done with your stack, is you've got to do the bits beforehand, get everything lined up, the automation, then the analytics, then the modeling. What's interesting though, is I think a lot of people are getting these analytics and modeling phases a bit muddled up. I mean, what's your sense there? Do you think people are a bit confused, or maybe even how would you describe to someone the difference?
Yeah, it's a great question, and yes, absolutely, they are confused, and I often ask people what is the difference, and the first thing I often people say is analytics is backward looking. Well, firstly, that's not correct, right? Because we've just described predictive analytics and prescriptive analytics, which is forward looking.
Yeah.
So analytics is about lots of data. Right, that's what analytics is, right? Analysis is all about the data. So generally, what you have in the analytics space is a huge amount of data, but it needs to be clean data. It needs to be good data, because otherwise it's going to be useless. Garbage in, garbage out, as the common phrase goes. So analytics is lots of data, and therefore lots of processing power and a lot more maths. So I guess it's more mathematical, more statistical, more quant, and therefore more coding. So it's more algorithmic based, statistical and trend, and therefore machines will understand the patterns and then predict on that basis. So analytics is very much about lots of data, and machine driven to a large degree. Machines doing the heavy lifting, whereas financial modeling doesn't necessarily have to have a lot of data. Typically our call financial modeling a three-way financial modeling, which is your income statement, balance sheet, and your cash flow. So there's actually not a huge amount of data. Most of it is in Excel. In fact, pretty much 99.9% of all models are Excel, the occasional Google Sheet here and there. But if you're in an investment bank and you speak to an investment banker, or a private equity person like you were, they're building these financial models on Excel. And so they don't have lots of data because there's a new business, or they're merging two companies, or it's an IPO. And so they might have a little bit of historical data, but again, it's not a lot, because it'd probably be the historical P&L and balance sheet and maybe a bit of the historical cash flow, but it's not at the transactional level. So the way I say financial modeling is more human, less machine, and not as much data, whereas analytics is more machine, less human, but lots of data. So that's really the two distinctions. There's no predictive three-way model driven by AI. And I don't think we're going to get there for a long time, because financial modeling requires you to understand the drivers. Now, yes, there is AI that can define some drivers for you, but ultimately you've got to model that in terms of how it impacts the cash flow, the balance sheet, and the profit and loss. And that's just a lot more data that we're probably not even collecting, like buyer behavior and creditor payment behavior, right? What's the organization's tendency to push creditors out further? Well, there's a bias there already, right? There's data in that, but no one's collecting that data. And so therefore no one's doing a predictive model on debtors and creditors and stock obsolescence. And There's a lot more in the predictive space that needs a lot more data to be as efficient as a financial model, which is, I guess, broader.
And Lance, like, look, you've got a fairly great global perspective. Are there certain parts of the world that are moving ahead on this area, or even some sort of areas within finance that are pushing the agenda? I mean, what are your thoughts in terms of how the future's looking for us?
Well, I think it does vary quite a lot. I mean, I think you'll typically find that banks and larger corporates have got bigger budgets, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually making better progress, right? Because I think a lot of the conversations that we've had with larger organizations around this is oh, we just needed to implement this ERP, then we'll come back to you to understand how you can add value. Because I do a lot of work with Brad and the Outperformer at the larger end of town, and we say, look, in the end, technology is just a tool. There's other skills we've got to learn to implement that. So whilst there might be larger organizations that've got bigger budgets, they're not focusing on the human side, the people side, and so we're chasing the latest shiny toy, thinking that's going to solve the problems and get all these bots. But in the end, we've really got to think about, well, how are we going to communicate to the business? How are we going to sell the value? How are we going to... So I find that generally across the world, we're not putting enough focus on the softer skills. So I can't think of, Australia included, I just don't think that we focused enough on the soft side. We always have budget constraints. I have many conversations with people saying, oh, no, you got a budget for a $20 million ERP implementation, but we don't have budget for a $50,000, $100,000 soft skill course, right? Because people think, oh, well, you'll just learn it. Just learn it on the fly, right? It's just crazy. So I think whilst I see a lot of progress, globally, I think Australia is probably one of the leaders when it comes to cloud accounting, and to some degree, Xero and maybe not so much QuickBooks, because QuickBooks is a lot more in the US, but certainly, we've had digital tax submission for, the UK is only now going to digital tax submissions, but they're making it compulsory as opposed to Australia, which is not compulsory, but we've had digital submission of tax, for almost a decade, I think. So I think Australia is very much ahead in the space of cloud accounting to a large degree, and I hate to say it, financial modeling as well, because a lot of the stuff that we've done, Model Off, which is the World Financial Modeling Championships, was developed in Australia. There's some cutting edge technologies for financial modeling and predictive and analysis and analytics that are developed in companies in Australia. So I think to some degree, Australia is a little bit ahead. But culturally, we have a few challenges as well. So, which I don't think is that different to anywhere else in the world, where the role of the CFO it's just Andy Burrows had a great post the other day around CFO stop business partnering, right?
Yes,
I actually
agree.
thought that was a phenomenal post, because it's so important that we need to work on our teams. We need to help, we need to inspire, we need to train, and we need to guide them, not look after our key stakeholder, get our teams to do that for us. If they're doing it for us, then we don't need to do any of that. And so I think we're stuck, right? CFOs have been talking about, oh, you must all partner, this is how you do it, and they've been doing it. But the reality is, the teams don't know how to do it. And the teams, I mean, there's still, you saw, I can't remember the gentleman's name was on LinkedIn, is, I'm sorry, I'm confused. What is this business partnering concept? Right. So there's still people out there, which, and it's been around, as you said, what, 1963? Or something around there. So it's been around for a long time, and still, and then I have quite robust debates with my good Professor Paul Thumbar around the finance business partnering, and he makes a very good point, and he's spot on around, if we're not getting our controllership right, then forget the value, right? And he's spot on. So I think again, it's about chasing the shiny title, not the shiny toy. we've got to get the basics right. Otherwise, we're just not going to get it. And I think globally, we're not getting the basics right. So I just don't see it moving as fast as, I guess, what people might talk about. Firstly, on the predictive stuff, less than 1% of companies in the world are using it. Microsoft, well done, Microsoft, you're brilliant. They are. I mean, but they've got the technology, right? They invented a lot of the technology themselves. So you'd expect Microsoft to be doing it. But I don't think that there's other companies out there that can do it, right? Because they just don't have the technology. Maybe they don't have the culture. I think probably more so the fact. And they don't have the sponsorship from the CFO, which I think is the biggest challenge.
I think you touched on some of them there, and I like the way you described it. We could probably spend the whole nother conversation talking about this, but I think the key point here is we've been around, like finance professionals, been around many thousands of years, all the way back to Babylonian times. And I think with the new technologies now, we need to really look at getting the basics right. And look,
we've got no excuses anymore. Literally, we can't say, oh, it's the system or this. We've literally got no excuse. I mean, Excel can do wonderful things, and Power BI is free with Excel. So stop complaining and get on with it.
Yeah, it's not that sort of hammer and nail. It's like we have these tools that have been engineered for us to get this value out of them. It's about getting the basics right to go do it. It's like we figured out how to use a hammer, okay, and hammer and nailing. Now we just need to figure out how to use these tools to the best effect. They've been engineered for us. Let's go use them.
Absolutely. I mean, the amount of people that I speak to that haven't even heard of Power BI or what is it? I mean, I'm like, what do you mean you don't know what Power BI is? And they said, oh, I've never heard of it. I'm like, I mean, let alone Power Query and Power Pivot, right? Which is sort of embedded within, the Power BI, which is actually in Excel. And in fact, in Excel has the Power BI add-in as well. So, it's just we're not learning. We're not being curious. I think that's the challenge.
It's weird, isn't it? Yeah. Are we really being curious? The interesting one here, right, is are we really being curious? People sort of point to finance professionals and accountants as being very curious folks. It's like embedded as one of our sort of key mindsets. But when you just play that back, lads, are we really being curious? I mean, if we look at our weeks, how much time are we spending on independent thought and investigation, trying out new tools, playing with new technologies, and spread that across the profession? I'd put my money on it's like not even people aren't spending even 1 day a week just trying out new things, bringing in new thoughts, investing in themselves, investing in their career, even on the soft skills, put the technology to one side. I put my bottom dollar on it. They're not even putting a day a week in. So how are we going to thrive as a profession if we're not even doing the basics right and investing for the future? So hey, I'm the one interviewing here now, Lance. So I'm getting your thoughts.
I'm
on a ramble. I know, reverse, yeah. So come here. I know. I'm really respectful of your time. You do so much for our profession and thought leadership, and I want to be respectful of your time. So I suppose, look, in terms of books, I know you've been reading a few, and you mentioned some good ones to me over the last number of months. But is there any sort of books you've been reading lately that you'd recommend our audience go check out?
Yeah, I mean, the subtle art of not giving an F was a good one. I'm not sure if this podcast is R-rated or not, so I'll try to keep it clean. But and my wife's a social worker. She's got a master's in social work, and she sort of didn't enjoy it. She said, "Oh, it's just another self-help book and all the rest." But I found it quite refreshing. I found it, she said, "Oh, it was very badly written." Yes, it's not professionally written, but it's sort of written in really in your face layman terms that's inspiring. And actually off the back of that book, off the back of reading that, it made me think about what value am I going to leave, and it's not about saying you don't care, right? The subtle art is not just saying about what it's about. You choose what you care about and what you don't care about, and stop blaming other people for the fact that you're unhappy, right? And try and do something that's actually going to leave an imprint on the world, not just talking about you. So a lot of the stuff that I read really hit home quite hard, and so inspired me to potentially go on a journey and write a book. I know you've written a book, so I'm going to sort of start that process. But in the end, I think the key thing is, I have the luxury of being able to research all these tools, play with new tech, because that's my job. You know, my team are now set up. They're dealing with a lot of the stuff as well with their clients, with our clients. But fundamentally, you know, I have the ability to sit and explore stuff. And so therefore I can impart a lot of that knowledge and experience to others. And I think that's, you know, sharing is caring, but fundamentally, you know, you've really got to think about what you do and care about and what you don't. And I think that's the key thing that the book, you know, threw on me was like, you know, it's not that we're not human, that we shouldn't care. We actually do care. We just choose how that affects us. And I think that's the important thing. So, you know, we're finance people. We probably stereotypical, don't have a heart, and, you know, black and white, right? And so even there, it's sort of, you know, we don't sort of open up that other part of us, which I think is there. We just got to sort of make ourselves vulnerable and explore it and care a little bit more. Because, you know, if you don't care, you're sort of shutting yourself out, and you think, well, if I don't care, it's not going to affect me. But the reality is it does. You've got to really work out what you do care about and what you don't, and just sort of brush it off and move on.
Yeah, that's a great summary, Lance. That's it. It's figuring out what we care about, and then just doing our best with that, like, you know. I suppose if some of our audience wish to continue the conversation, how is best to connect with you at?
LinkedIn, as always. I've had my waves of, you know, in and out. I was away, and I'm determined to switch off LinkedIn. I actually uninstalled it off my phone because I knew I wasn't going to cope otherwise. Looking at it, yeah. So LinkedIn, I'm on, you know, multiple times a day, either directly or you know, also our website, Model Citizen, modelcitizn.com. But if you Google and post your podcast that I did with Chris Argent, if you Google "Excel is dead," my Medium post on the debate that we had comes up #1 on Google,
That's
globally.
awesome,
so if you're not quite sure where to find me, just Google "Excel is dead" and you'll find me.
Yeah, and we obviously know where you stand on that one, man. So
yeah, of course,
not for a long time.
No,
So
not by a long shot. In fact, I had dinner with Oz de Salil, who's an incredible MVP. He's got a YouTube channel, Excel on Fire. He has 13,000 followers. I have 256 or something like that. But anyway, you know, YouTube is just, you know, full of so much information. And he was the co-host of Excel TV, and he co-wrote a book with Bill Jelen, who's Mr. Excel, right? So this guy's a true rock star. But when you see him on the YouTube channel, you know, he's passionate, he's energetic, and I was hanging out with him, and it's just incredible, you know, being with these sorts of people that are experts in, you know, in their field, and you can learn so much from them.
yeah, I completely agree, and I think that's like with our audience, it's just connecting, reaching out to folks like yourself, Lance, Mr. Excel as well, and these other experts out there. It's amazing what you can find on the internet.
Oh, there's so much on just Google it. Just
yeah.
Again, go back to be curious, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I still find,
exactly.
Yes, it took me 18 months to get my head around Power BI, because I was trying to build a three-way model connected to Power BI. So for those that don't know, financial modeling works horizontally, data works vertically. So when you want to put a three-way model, which is horizontally in terms of time series,
Yes.
into a data model, which is vertical, it's not so straightforward. So, but I was determined to do it. And you know, I used YouTube, you know, Google, and of course, you know, I often refer back to Oz and Chandu as well. And there's so many resources online that, you know, there is no excuse. You know, VLOOKUP and index match was a classic one that if you want to go watch and have a laugh, definitely go listen to Oz de Salil's YouTube clip on VLOOKUP versus index match. And I'll just quote a little bit of it. He's saying, "Listen, everyone, this is just a tool. It's just a formula. It's not a religion." You know, because you had all the VLOOKUP people saying the index match people, and it's just like, and coming down from the hills with their manifesto. And I mean, this guy's hilarious. He's a true genius when it comes to entertaining something as technical as Excel. So definitely look out for him.
And Lance, look, really appreciate everything and sharing your thoughts or whatever. Would you have any maybe parting thoughts for our audience before we wrap up?
Yeah, Andrew, I think, look, it's great to get involved and connect with people, but I find that it's so easy to slip back into old habits. So if there's one thing that I want people to take away from this discussion is you're the one who can control your own destiny. I controlled my own by leaving corporate world and setting up my own firm. And now I'm traveling to Sri Lanka and potentially India to talk about the transformative CFO. So there's stuff that we can do that if we just open our minds and we dream a little bit, but we just sort of look at the opportunities, and they're vast. I still think finance is sitting on a gold mine of opportunity, because we've got these really cool, powerful tools that can make our lives happier. Not, why would you want to copy and paste spreadsheets? It's just crazy. There's stuff there that we can learn and sort of have more time for ourselves and our communities and do better things and spend more time learning. If we don't learn, you stop learning when you die. Are we dying early? Is that what we want to do? I don't think so. I mean, I just think that people should, your podcast is great. You've got some excellent speakers, and occasionally I jump in and out of it and I find some gems, and I've posted on them as well. And, people must listen to your podcast. People must listen to other podcasts.
Yes.
And, on the train or just research and be curious, because the information's there. The information is there for the taking, but then what you do with it is also important. So I think, listen, research, and just try. No one's perfect. Like I said, it took me 18 months to get my head around Power BI, and I didn't want to give up. Right, I was determined to sort of get my head around it, and now I think it's a great tool for dashboarding and reporting.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to end. Actually, I think we need to question our habits, where I suppose, even back down to what we really care about as well. To your previous point, Lance. And anything worthwhile isn't always going to be easy. So
No.
Jeez, what a great way to end the show. So Lance, thank you so much for investing your time with us today and coming on the show.
Pleasure, Andrew, and thanks for having me back.